Hello, friends. Welcome to the overview and a little bit of explanation for chapter 2 of this book, Beauty and Imitation by Daniel McInerny. Here I did the introduction, chapter 1. Here we are at chapter 2. The intro was kind of the general overview. Chapter 1 was arguing that art is ultimately about this idea of mimesis, imitation. There's something that's being imitated, kind of put on display, something made present, even though it's absent, for us to consider and to contemplate. Chapter 2 is about what is kind of the primary subject that is imaged for us in art. Ultimately, what McInerny is going to argue is that it's about the human condition, right? It's this story about a protagonist who's after ultimately fulfillment as a human being and the choices that that protagonist makes, and either towards fulfillment or towards the failure of fulfillment. Stories are about humans in action. That's what we see, humans making decisions, humans doing things. Part of what we love about sports is seeing humans in action, right? Kind of fulfilling their abilities, their skills, putting them to use. And so Aristotle says that that's what art is about as well. Aristotle also says that every action ultimately is motivated by some good. Every action is aimed at some good. Every decision that we make, everything that we do, there's some good, or at least perceived good, that we're after in making that decision. This good that we're after, ultimately, again, in the context of what Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas have to say, it's not just about what we think is good. It's part of what we're after here, right? Is lining up what we think is good with what is actually good for us, what is good according to our nature. So it's not just my preferences versus your preferences. It's what is the ultimate good of the human person. According to the nature of the human person, what does human fulfillment, human flourishing look like? And then making decisions in accord with that or contradictory to that. The first definition that McInerny offers for us about a story, about what a story is it's a story pictures the human pursuit of some good. Okay. And so then stories are a way of contemplating the narrative structures of human life. So he gives an example of someone saying, I waited 30 minutes for the bus, or something like that. There's a whole story in that. We can think about that, we can contemplate it. We've all had sort of similar experiences to that. And as we look at and as we experience the structures of human life, right, the narrative structures of human life, then we get to contemplate it, we get to think about it. And similar to the way that we do in philosophy, except that philosophy and art differ in this way, that in art we contemplate it through the senses, through the stories that are told to us. In philosophy, we think about it in a purely abstract kind of way. So ultimately, philosophy and art, we're aiming for a deeper understanding of what life is all about, and the kinds of decisions that we make, and the type of life that we lead, and the kind of thing that we are as human beings. And so the next definition, this is version 2 of the definition, much more filled out. It starts the same way. A story pictures a human pursuit of some goal or good, right? And then he says, in this pursuit, the protagonist encounters conflict, keeping him from the goal, conflict that the protagonist resolves or fails to resolve by his own choices, not by chance. These choices ultimately reverse the protagonist's fortunes in a way that both is both probable and marvelous, and so offer the reader or audience an understanding of the meaning of the protagonist's adventure. So the protagonist encounters conflict. They're trying to pursue some goal or some good, and they either fail or they succeed in doing that. And the way that the story is told should be probable. We want to develop a character, see a character, and think that that is what the character is going to do. Even when we encounter things that we've never really seen in real life, like hobbits and elves and dwarves and those sorts of things, these other beings from these fantasy, there's still an established character, and we think that that is probable according to the character of that kind of being, of even the individual characters. If there are always like completely random things happening, then we sort of lose the thread of the story, and it seems improbable to us, and we don't buy into it. It's got to be something sort of believable, right? But also things that are surprising and things that reveal to us in maybe a new way something about the protagonist's adventure, which is ultimately is about our adventure as protagonists in our own lives. McInerny says that stories trade in meaning. Ultimately, there is some deeper meaning that we're after and being offered to us in the art. And all art, in some way, is a story. That's part of what he's arguing in this book as well, not necessarily in this part. So He's also saying that he differentiates between purpose and end. The end is the thing that is objective, according to our nature as human beings, what it looks like for fulfillment, for flourishing. But the purpose is what we intend. Purpose has some conscious intention behind it. The end has to do with what it looks like for the perfection of the human person, right? The perfection of that kind of thing. Like you could say that the end of an acorn is to become a tree. The end of a tadpole is to become a frog. That's not the purpose necessarily, because the purpose should have that intention. And so there's a quote here. He says, "After all, purposes are only acts of the human mind deciding to pursue something in the here and now, whereas ends determine human nature and the human good by necessity." Right. So the ends are necessarily linked with our nature as human beings. Purpose is this conscious intention behind it. Ultimately, the story reveals the protagonist's adequacy or inadequacy in pursuit of that end. And the way the protagonist looks at things, the decisions the protagonist makes. And so that leads to the third definition. The third definition, everything stays the same up until, and then there's a thing that's added at the end, right? So we're looking at the meaning of the protagonist's adventure. Right? Stories deal with meaning and the meaning of the protagonist's adventure. In other words, an understanding that manifests the adequacy or inadequacy of the protagonist's purposes to the human end. The next section is about the structure of the story, beginning and then quotes muddle and end. So every story has a beginning. There's some kind of action that happens, and then everything in the story follows from that action, some event of some kind, right? A significant action, significant event. And then there's a wholeness to the story. There's this thread that runs throughout. Part of what Aristotle said makes the Iliad and the Odyssey so beautiful is that everything is tied in, everything is related. So the story forms a coherent whole. So there's some event. And the middle section is the protagonist in the middle or in the muddle, as he says. And then the end is the resolution. Either the protagonist makes the right decisions for human flourishing, or fails. In the case of something like Hamlet, we recognize, even moral subjectivists would say something like, that was a tragedy. That's not how it should have turned out. And there's pity and sadness over the events that took place, and there's ultimately a failure of the protagonist to reach his end. And so we get to definition 4. Again, the rest is the same, but the first paragraph is changed a little bit, that first statement. And it says, a story is an ordered sequence of events with the beginning, middle, and end that pictures the human pursuit of some goal or good. So he adds the part about the beginning, the middle, the end, this structured story that has order to it. To carry on with the definition, so we get the whole thing. In this pursuit, the protagonist encounters conflict, keeping him from the goal, conflict that the protagonist resolves or fails to resolve by his own choices, not by chance. These choices ultimately reverse the protagonist's fortunes in a way that is both probable and marvelous, and so offer the reader or audience an understanding of the meaning of the protagonist's adventure, an understanding that manifests the adequacy or inadequacy of the protagonist's purposes to the human end. One of the things that draws us to stories is that we experience life as a story. We ourselves are a whole, right? A unified thing, and we are experiencing our life as a whole. And it takes the form of a narrative story, right? And we face these decisions every day, and we are making decisions either towards some end, towards fulfillment. And he uses the Greek word eudaimonia, right? Eudaimonia ultimately is an activity. It's not something that happens to us. Eudaimonia, eu is the Greek prefix for good, and then daimonia has to do with like a lasting sort of spirit or energy or action that's inside of us. It's not just happy or unhappy things happening to me. I'm lucky, I'm unlucky. It is living the fulfillment, flourishing as a human being. And all of us are making decisions every day towards that goal or not. Part of what stories do in philosophy, certainly, is to understand what is the nature of that kind of fulfillment. And then what are the decisions, the way of looking at things that's going to lead me towards that end? Are our choices going to lead us towards wholeness in life, or towards failing to achieve a kind of integrity in our lives. In this story, and in life and in philosophy, we're constantly asking and contemplating this idea: is our purpose congruent to our end? Right? The end and the purpose are different, like we said before. The things that I'm purposing, intending, are those congruent with the end and the ultimate objective goal of my life? And stories, then, they reveal to us truths. And they do it in a way different from philosophy. It's not pure abstract reasoning, deductive reasoning. Instead, it's given to us through an experience. So we have experiential knowledge. And the story is ultimately about truth. And it doesn't reveal truth in the way that philosophy does. It does it in a different way, right? It's fictional. And yet it's still about this narrative structure of human life, human fulfillment, seeing characters, humans in action, deciding for or against their ultimate fulfillment, whether they realize it or not. Philosophy and art work differently. They're different kinds of inquiries. And as Aristotle says, different inquiries give us different levels of certainty, and they have different methods associated with them. The method of finding the truth in science is different from the method of finding truth in geometry, or the different way of finding truth in history, for example. And so philosophy and art, even though we are after the same kinds of truths, it's done in a different kind of way and provides a different kind of experience for the audience, for the thinker, for the creator, and everybody involved. But ultimately, that is the thing that is imaged to us, the thing that is imitated in art. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, share with others, and grab a copy of the book so you can read all the details for yourself.